trying to like recall, I guess. More so just like there's some times where it's like I wanted to like you saw me. I pulled out put piece of paper because I like doing that.
Are you
serious? Yeah, putting the names.
It's not really necessary.
Exactly. Understandable.
I think so.
Other than that, it's just like.
All right. Gonna start the design workshop now. So this one is about progression and empowerment. So that's a little abstract, and or rather, empowerment is very abstract. We have a less abstract definition of progression usually, but I'm gonna probably ruin that for you in just a bit. First off, can someone tell me if you think about a progression system, what an image is conjured into your noggin? So can you share what image you get when I say progression system in your old being? Yes.
Getting the morph ball and like Metroid?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So getting power-ups in a Metroidvania, that's progression, a progression system. Anything else? Yeah.
Skill trees.
Skill trees. Yep. Anything else? I guess off the bat.
XP bar, does that just get you different, like I'm thinking of Downwell, you guys said Downwell?
Yeah, and so XP bars.
So you've got like an XP bar, but it doesn't really get you too many new things from round to round.
It's just like a measure of progress.
Yeah, and like you get like different types of characters which are slightly different, and like themes for the whole game, which is nice.
I got two. Unlocking new zones, like getting somewhere new for the first time.
Yes.
And also that like hours played tracker on Steam.
Yeah. So yeah.
And like story progression.
Yes.
Like, especially like story-based things,
right.
Like learning the new thing that is super interesting.
Right. So right off the bat, just for progression alone, we have like if you break that down, there's so many different definitions for what progress could be. Right? Is one just like getting a higher level. There you can make progress exploration-wise of just how much of the map you've done. Hours played, just progress on like how much you've played a game. You can have progress on like percentage completion of a game. There's also like collection and stuff like that. So there are many different types of progression. You can collect items, like in Breath of the Wild, a big part of your progress is just like how strong are your items. There's also like abilities that you get, but money, you can make progress monetarily. You can have bigger stats, bigger enemies. There's some games like wave-based games, like your only progress is how difficult is the current challenge, right? The bigger and bigger waves come at you. How far are you, percentage completion, number of collectibles, acquired abilities, culmination of choices. So like in a choice-based game, right? You feel progress when something that you said earlier like is affecting the current story, right? And then there's game mastery. There's a progress in, this is especially true for roguelikes. The only real progress that follows you is how good you are at the game. So looking at all of these different things, can we define what progress is in a game?
With luck, forward.
For words.
Not if there isn't luck in the game.
Oh, this is perhaps the most general thing.
Okay.
But a change in either the mental state or the game state that it occurs after application.
After something happens.
Can I ask like if I missed anything before this?
We just saw the first slide.
Okay.
What we went down is just like there are a lot of ways you can define progression, and now we're talking about there's a lot of ways you can define progression.
Yeah. Yes.
So an increase in the amount of stuff you are aware of that has to do with the game, and so skill would be an increase in your knowledge of how the game works. story-based. It'd be increase in the knowledge of the story.
I didn't think about that, but that's a good general way of putting it. It's an additive process, right? As you progress, there is more blank.
I think from the human perspective, it's you learning,
Yeah.
getting mods.
You're learning about the abilities that you can have.
I might even disagree with the second point, like cookie clicker, when you have a crew to billion cookies, is that progress? Is that you just,
I mean, that's kind of the
is that
point
just
of
the
the game.
system?
That is the progress.
That's the eventual state of the system.
I have a potential definition which could be like
Good progress, sorry.
experiencing a portion of the available content, like currencies, that you now have bigger access to more options of purchases, which allows you to experience more of the content that the developer intended you to experience.
So we can
I think
measure.
that's fake progress.
Sometimes
Content might be a difficult metric by which to judge things. It's
Right.
like progress quest.
That's
like,
the facade of progress.
a lot
It
of
makes you
mobile
feel
games
good,
give
but
you
it's actual
progress when you're logged out.
But you can kind of measure progress by amount of experience, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
So
Go on.
it's kind of funny, your definition, because I've played Sekiro like all the way through like 6 times now, and after the 3rd time there was nothing new in the game. So like
Sorry.
Sekiro, it's a new From Software game, kind of like Dark Souls. And so I played through it 3 times. There was nothing new for me to explore. I'm talking to his thing of like actual
Content.
progress is like discovering new content from the thing, but I am still progressing in the game because I'm getting better at playing against these guys. That I know every single ability he's going to use. I don't have them memorized, but I've experienced every single attack he does before.
Yeah.
Now I'm just memorizing it and getting better at fighting them.
Right. So if you don't look at content and look at experience instead, like for example, I played Dendera like dozens of times, and I almost beat the world record, but like at the fastest that I ever did, which was 49 minutes. That is a new experience of like going that fast. So yeah, there's kind of that. I don't have a definition for this. I couldn't think of one. I kind of like this experience-based thing. Maybe later I'll go back to it. But I guess the point of this is that it's hard to define because it means different things to different people playing different games. So let's talk about, okay, so real quick, empowerment. So thinking about these kinds of progress, like, and you think about empowering the player, how can you empower a player to have a certain type of progress? Is it any of these? Is it, so if the progress that they want is exploring, letting them traverse might be a way to empower them to explore. Maybe if it's a completion-based game, if you show them the percentage, then that's empowering them to complete. I don't know, what do you guys think? Does that seem complete to you, like that one-to-one kind of?
Not really. I'm a little confused as to empower, because in my mind, empower is kind of like assist or enable.
Right.
So is it like empower with regards to giving them progress or making them feel like the progress is their own, or is it like power to choose their experience?
Right, so we've gotten to a point, thank you.
Oh.
We've gotten to a point where, what does it mean to empower? What is the definition of empower? Well, according to Webster's dictionary, it's to give someone the authority or power to do something. To empower someone to do something is to give them the authority or power to do that thing. So what does that mean in games? What is that something, right? When you empower someone in a game, are you giving them the authority and power to do anything they want? No. What does authority mean in game? Yeah.
This might not cover all cases, but this might hit on a lot of them, which is it could be boiled down to it gives the player agency. Agency over what, that depends, but.
Okay, say it's a walking sim. Can you have any amount of empowerment at all in a walking sim if they don't have agency?
You can do it narratively, but is narrative empowerment the same as
You can
mechanic?
stand still say, take this walking sim, I do what I want.
So you have a little bit of agency there. That's true.
Well, this wouldn't be agency, but if the game is set up to react to players' decisions to, like, say they keep walking down one path, and the game's obviously telling them, please go back the other way, but as long as they keep putting up things to show the player, like, hey, we acknowledge you went over here, that gives them some feedback, some fulfillment of, hey, you did the thing.
Yeah.
Might be a choice.
Yeah, that's a good point. If someone is playing a game and they want to explore like a certain corridor and they like spend all the time going down that corridor and there's like it's just empty, then have you empowered the player to explore? No, right? Because so we'll get into that. So first, let's talk about what that something is, and that this empowerment. You can empower, so you can give them the authority and power to collect, to grow, to overcome, explore, master, solve, to progress. So we have all these different definitions of what it means to progress, right? I would posit that to empower a player is to push them to progress, to give them, not necessarily push them, but give them, again, the authority and power to progress in whichever way that like they want and fits within the game, right? So if you have a walking sim, that there is an exploration in this game. There's just a narrative. It's like Brian said. There's a progression in the story. So, well, I didn't write it here, but maybe like learn, or like there's a progression of knowledge. And so if every time they walk forward, they gain more knowledge, then you're empowering them to learn about the game if you give them the ability to progress there. So let's talk about authority, because that doesn't mean much in a game, so I just redefined it. If you have the authority to do something in a game, it means it's viable in the systems. That's the definition that I'm going to use. So, in Hitman, you die a lot. You experiment with things, you try something, and then you die. And then you restart the game, the level. And you do that tons and tons of times until you fully understand the system, and then you can use it. Hitman, the reason that happens is you have the authority. I'm saying that Hitman gives you the authority to do that, because you're not punished for dying. You just come back and you do it again, and you gain knowledge from that. So there's that progression of knowledge every time you experiment something and die. Call of Duty doesn't give you the authority to explore, right? You're thrown into this battlefield and you just shoot things, and if you shoot some things and then stop and start poking around the corners, you're not going to find anything. So like, it's like the game's not about that, and it doesn't encourage that. So that's not something, with this definition of authority, it's not something you really have the authority to do. I think I'm using more of justify as kind of what I'm interpreting authority here to mean in games. Yeah.
Is that supposed to say instead of fighting, wandering around instead of finding is a waste of time?
Fighting, yes, not finding. Okay, let's take another game. League of Legends. What is something that League of Legends gives you the authority to do?
Destroy minions.
Die.
Destroy minions. Die, yeah? What is something it does not give you the authority to do?
Yell at people if they die on purpose.
It kind of does, though.
If you're too vulgar, you'll get banned.
Right, so that's kind of de-incentivized.
It
Yeah.
doesn't give you the authority to die on purpose because
You're supposed to report them.
they give you punishments
Yeah.
if you're dying on purpose.
Yeah, so you don't really have, and you kind of did in the past, but like you don't really have the authority to explore too, but to like intentionally plan it so you play against people that you die a bunch to give them experience. Like that's not a thing that like works in the system. But yeah, you don't have authority to explore. Like you know the map once you've played it once,
Or
and
you're
then
expected to. Okay.
or you're expected to. But even in your first game, you kind of explore. But if you're spending your time exploring, then you're losing the game, and you don't get anything out of exploring. but it's not a game that gives you the authority to explore. It also doesn't give you the authority to have a good time. That's my hot take on League of Legends.
Oh my goodness.
I actually do enjoy it. Now let's talk about power. This is kind of more obvious. It just means that you can do it. So in Dishonored, like you can kill the big bad person, or you can incapacitate them, and that gives you power to change the world. If you kill a bunch of people all the time, then there are going to be more man-eating rats. There are going to be more plague victims. The world just sucks a lot more. So you have the power to change the world. In World of Warcraft, when you start, you don't have the power to kill the Lich King right away. You get that power later. So that creates that progress. Power does, because as you progress, you get more power to do more things, to have more experiences. One big difference between power and authority is that power inherently is very dependent on where you are in the game. Authority fluctuates less. You might have some levels that push more for exploration than others, but in general, authority is more overarching, and power is more of a build. Does that make sense?
So, is it technically possible, based off your definitions of power and
Yes.
authority, to have the power to do something, but not the authority to do it?
I would say so. Yeah.
So, like, you've got the tools you need to go walk over there, but you go walk over there, and it doesn't, there's no justifiable reason to walk over there.
Right. You don't derive anything from that. Right. There was I'm trying to remember what the game was. There was a game that I was playing not too long ago where I realized that I had the power to just kill people that weren't important NPCs or whatever, but that were just randomly walking around, and I killed them. And there was no police, there was no money or experience or anything. I just murdered them, and then nothing happened. And so in that sense, I have the power to kill them, yeah, but the game doesn't acknowledge me for it.
Did they have specific names, or were they just a random person that didn't have a name, and now?
They're just a random person that.
Yeah. So a new person will be spawned in to replace them, so it won't even affect the game world.
Yes.
Situation?
Yeah. Yes. So in a situation where you have authority to do something but not power, I was playing Divinity: Original Sin 2, and you do have the authority to kill people in that game, and you can kill even. So you can kill important NPCs. You can kill unimportant NPCs, and that will affect the game. And I decided I'm doing a run where I kill literally every single thing that I run into. And that was kind of fun until I ran into a child. And I have the authority to kill NPCs, but I don't have the power to kill children because you cannot target them with any damaging abilities. You just can't. Yeah.
Is this in Skyrim or Dishonored?
Wouldn't that mean
Divinity.
you don't have the authority?
Divinity, okay.
Huh?
Wouldn't that mean you don't have the authority to kill it? In the game, it's not allowed in the system.
Authority a lot of times it's allowed in the system. It just it's not quote unquote part of the game. You're not justified in any way for it. When you physically cannot, that's lack of power, and they a lot of times intertwine. But in this situation, technically I don't have the authority to kill children, but I was looking at a more broad of I have the authority to kill everyone, but I don't have the power to kill children. Yes. Okay, so to empower a player means to encourage and enable the player to do X, right? Where X is a type of progression that is allowed by the system and desired by the player. So if, for example, if I'm playing Mass Effect, and I want to have a story-based experience, then Mass Effect is empowering me because I do get choices. And I have the authority to do it. It's encouraged by the game, and I am enabled by the dialogue choice system. But yeah, progress is not always a linear thing. I'm gonna go into examples so we can actually talk about stuff. Here's Spider-Man. You can get suits. Suits have powers. There's a skill tree. Spider-Man, I think, is a good example, a little bit of, like, all of it is probably not good, but some aspects of it is really good. For example, that sneaky-looking suit gives you a sneaky power. That makes sense, and that empowers me to be sneaky if I want to be sneaky, right? I can just put on the sneaky suit, and now I'm being empowered to do the thing that I want. Same, there's a whole web slinger part of the skill tree, which is funny because usually you think of skills in terms of like combat prowess a lot of times, but web slinger, not necessarily. It just makes you swing better. And if you're a person like me who enjoys the swinging, then the web slinger tree will attract me. And this is, I think, important because a lot of times when we think about talent trees, we look at the most useful things, right? We want to create a talent tree that gives a player all the useful things that they need, and usually like 3 different builds of usefulness. I say, you don't need to. You just need to make the game more fun. You need to empower the things you want the player to do. So by having a web slinger talent tree, the game is empowering me to sling webs, right? If you play a game that is very that's like maybe an RPG that has exploration and combat options, right? And maybe dialogue too, right? And then you can talk your way out of fights. But your talent tree has no dialogue and no exploration. It's all different types of combat. Then what are you empowering the player to do?
To encourage combat?
Yeah, you're empowering progression through fighting. And this might seem innocuous because it's like, well, the upgrade is just like an extra boost no matter what. Like if they want to talk, they can still talk. But you're not empowering them because you're not encouraging that, right? When the player gets a new combat ability, they're like, I want to try this out. I want to see what this does. If they don't have any, like,
incentive?
right, if they never get a new dialogue ability, which you never see in games, then over time they're going to be less likely to do dialogue because that's going to be boring because they're going to be doing pretty much the same kind of like choice thing each time and getting all these new combat abilities that they're not using that much. And that's going to feel bad. And they're going to feel like this is a game about fighting, right? And maybe they won't think that consciously, but that kind of sinks in.
Actually, lots of games unlock dialogue options for like exploration or stuff like that.
Right, but do you ever see that on a talent tree?
I don't know, I don't really play RPGs.
The only time I ever saw that, the only 2 times, so some games have like persuasion, and if you improve your persuasion skill, then it unlocks like an extra dialogue here and there. And then another one is like mind trick in a Star Wars game.
Some have barter, which basically just makes everything cheaper.
yeah, which doesn't feel like bartering, but I guess it does the trick. So, okay, so.
What about faster than light? You can unlock dialogue options by having different races or by having different mastery of different abilities.
I do like that, yeah.
But that's not, like, you wouldn't go for something just to get the dialogue option. It's more
Right,
like a bonus.
it's just kind of.
But it does encourage you to get more of those. Like I remember in FTL, like when I got the slug people into FTL, and you go to Nebula, you see like, oh, I got you got to see new things happen, like interactions. Heck, when you had more select people and you encourage you to get it, you actually got new shit because of it.
Yeah.
It's like pushing you to explore more and keep those units further and make connections. And as you do those progressions, like you said before, it encourages it by giving you more things to work with as you do those things, and by either having a radar system or better aliens to get, or if you get all of the aliens and you get like a new ship because of it. There are a lot of I don't know if that gives so much. Sorry.
That's a great example of empowerment. Like that feeling that you just expressed was excitement because the game empowered you to do these things, and that feels good. Yeah.
Though a slight distinction in FTL, that empowerment is not empowerment to do dialogue, it's empowerment to discover new things because things will occur because of that.
Right.
Systemically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just bridging the beginning and end of this system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any good examples though that have in like empowerment through dialogue though?
It's yeah.
Standing here.
And
Do you have dialogue?
does Stanley talk ever?
No, but I mean,
No,
where
but-
you walk decides what the narrator says at you, and you may make conscious decisions to interact with the narrator. Just like, please, why are you standing in this broom closet? Please walk out of this broom closet. You can decide to stay.
You're saying the
And
only-
that is a dialogue path.
That guides your decisions is I want to do this thing to see what the narrator will say.
That's
And
more
reacts to
exploration
them.
though, isn't it?
My only
It's
problem is
Yeah,
if
it's
someone dies
movement
while
instead
in the broom.
of dialogue. What defines
It's
dialogue?
narrative interaction.
I would
Dialogue
actually,
is
yeah,
dialogue.
I would argue that that's a form of dialogue. It's just nonverbal. Because you don't go through a door to find what's behind it. You go through it to piss off the narrator.
Stanley Parable is great.
It's really good. Yeah, that's a good example. It's empowering you to have this interaction because every time you do, something different happens, and that's for sure interesting. There are games that empower you to do dialogue by giving you better relationships with people, so influence points and stuff like that. It's hard to find an example of the other way around, where something else empowers you to do dialogue rather than it being a self-sustaining thing. Yeah?
Don't have an answer, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have to, in order to empower a player to do a thing, do you have to reward them for that thing in terms of that thing? For instance, what you were talking about there with giving favoritism points with the NPC or something for talking with them. If that doesn't directly help you in dialogue, but it helps you with like fighting somehow with them as a follower, that's not rewarding you in dialogue, but it's rewarding you for having done dialogue.
Yes.
Is
And
that a
it's,
sideways system?
I would say that empowers you to do both.
Okay.
I think that empowers you more towards dialogue though. Because yeah, you're better at fighting, but it's not in a way that like, oh, now I want to fight to see how much better I am. Because it's not like a unique, it's usually not a unique ability. Sometimes it is. Then you want to get out there and try out that unique ability.
But just having a reward.
Right, makes you kind of want to do that more. One way is gift mechanics that I've seen, where like you do a certain dungeon, you kill a bunch of enemies, and then you pick up this item that you recognize, hey, this makes me think of this character, so you gift it to that character and you get like tons of influence and they like really like you. That was Dragon Age Origins did that. That kind of empowers you, right? Because you're finding doing something else, you get this, it makes you think of the character, now you're empowered to have that conversation with the character. System itself.
What is or which one is that?
This is Path of Exile.
Oh no, I know that I remember now.
So it's hard to see, but there are like there are 7 classes, right?
I think so, but you can mix them fairly.
Yeah, so
Yes. So there's 7 classes, but all the class means is where you start on this tree.
It's kind of like RuneScape or Skyrim, like if your path is not defined by the beginning.
Right. So I could start at Witch over here. I know Witch is here because I only ever played Witch. And then you could go like, oh, I'll go around here and get stuff from whoever this is.
I think that's some sort of fighter.
Yeah.
What does that encourage though? Because sometimes you want to like min-max kind of thing and just go straight into only the witch category.
that answers the first question.
Yeah, so that empowers someone who, it empowers someone who's into min-maxing in a way. Because you are empowered to go all for Witch. So that's something you're able to do, and it's viable in the game, right? You get rewards for it. Very strong witch. You're also empowered to mix witch and fighter, right? Or like whatever that one is. Maybe it's barbarian. You mix witch and barbarian. Maybe you're swinging your hammer and casting spells. Like something happened because of that. Something that is unique and interesting, and you're empowered to do that. But let's think about what kind of player would look at this talent tree and feel empowered and be interested in that. Someone who enjoys customizing their character. Yeah. Someone who just wants to hack and slash. No.
Stuff they don't want to base.
Right. Someone who wants to make meaningful choices.
Yes.
Yeah. I would posit that's a little iffy because you kind of like, usually you're like, oh, I want this thing or I want this thing, and then like the path there's like very few meaningful choices. But yeah, that's a meaningful choice. Creating
It's like you have the agency to do whatever you choose to do, and that makes it meaningful to themselves, I guess.
Right.
Instead of being just obstructed and saying like I have to only go this route.
Yeah. Someone who wants to roleplay.
Yeah. Medium.
Because I wanted to be an archer who summons a bunch of little dudes. So I can't remember if I chose to start as an archer or a witch, but I started as one of those, and then I progressed to summoning abilities, and then I progressed to bow abilities. And now I am an archer who stands back and lets all my minions do all the fighting.
You had a specific fantasy that you wanted to do, and that allowed you, and then you can kind of role play as that archer with minions. Yeah.
Do you say it's like that's the character? Like, I wish to learn more of the science of magic abilities and thus progress the wizard.
I feel like with computer games, at least the way that I role play is not by acting as the character, as much as just like creating the character that I want and like but like I don't pretend to or like talk as the character. I just like playing as this specific thing, and I'm gonna like play that.
But you can talk as the character if you want.
Of course.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
All the D&D kind of background as a brain.
Right.
Yeah. I want to be that.
What's someone else who would not be empowered by this? Brian?
Someone who doesn't like reading.
Someone
who doesn't like reading?
Yeah, doesn't want to spend a lot of time reading what each of those abilities do. Not all of them are abilities. Most of them are just like +1. Who's someone who is empowered?
Someone who isn't. Someone who's there for like, imagine it were a mobile game had a skill tree like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not there for long play sessions, you're there for short play sessions, and that is antithetical to short play sessions.
Yeah, this kind of pushes, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, who's someone who is empowered besides these?
Someone who is empowered?
So someone brought up min-max, yeah.
Someone who likes playing the game in different ways. So playing from playing the game over and over again.
Yeah.
And then, but doesn't want it to be exactly the same at the beginning.
Someone like
Right.
like varying ways, right? Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and the rest of the game also empowers that because of the way, so you get different gems, and the gems are like random each time, pretty much. And also,
I think even like the maps are all kind of random.
a little bit, yeah. And I think, if I remember, some items, maybe some or all of them, you can store in a cache that carries over between characters.
Yeah.
So something very interesting that may happen is maybe you're playing a witch with a bow and a bunch of minions, and then you find a super awesome strong axe. Maybe you'll start a new character who is like a barbarian because you want to use that big axe.
I'm pretty sure you have limited chest space, but you can pay for more chest space.
Yeah, that's one way to make money. Yeah.
Another type of player that could be empowered by this would be like a streamer whose goal is to be as relatable as possible to the target audience, because everyone uses the same like map to make their characters. So you're inherently relating to your audience by doing this.
By doing that, yeah.
honestly, it'd be really funny if the streamers said like, yeah, the entire chat just chooses all my skills, and they just screw you over.
Plays
Yeah,
Path of
Twitch
Exile.
plays Path of Exile.
Yikes.
And insanity ensues. Becomes like one of those OP characters in the game.
I could see Twitch trying to optimize for a no input build.
But that's also not what the players see when they play the game, right? It doesn't
No, it is.
start
Oh,
zoomed in
No.
it's zoomed,
It's-
yeah.
it's-
yeah.
it's
Very
zoomed
zoomed.
onto wherever
I
you're
think
at.
somebody probably just get the screenshots to make this whole thing. You can't
Yeah.
zoom out like that.
It was really hard to find a shot of it like this.
Hey.
Metroidvania. Hollow Knight is a very good game. So progression system. The primary progression in Metroidvanias, like you said, it's power-ups. Here's an example. Monarch Wings lets you double jump. Spoiler alert. Secondary is hard to find collectibles. So like these charms, you can just like find them in secret places or by doing like secret things. So let's start. What kind of progress does this power-up empower?
Exploration, movement, freedom, wings of flight.
Yeah, you make progress by exploring the area, right? This empowers you because A, you explored to get to those monarch wings, and now that you have them, you have more power to explore. And like all of Metroidvania is kind of like built around this thing of like, you explore to get this so you can explore better to get this, and of course a lot of times it's combat abilities, but they will also lock exploration by combat a lot of times. For example, there's this enemy that curls up into an undestructible ball when you get close. So and it's blocking a passage into an area, so you can't get into that area until you get the ability that lets you shoot a damaging ball of light. Yeah.
Vaguely unrelated. Dark Souls is a Metroidvania, isn't it?
Yes.
I never considered that.
Like Dark Souls is very similar to Metroidvania.
No, it is a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
How
I
so?
would put it in the same category as Metroid Prime,
Mhm.
which is like 3D Metroidvanias. They
Yeah.
have like some major differences because they haven't quite figured out how to do progress. They don't do progression usually quite the same, but
Right.
the focuses of the games tend to be the same of exploration.
Yeah.
And
I would argue it actually does fit the mold entirely because they beat a lot of areas behind it to get this boss killed before you can continue. And you explore around getting upgrades until you are good enough to kill the boss, and they do.
I mean, it's a Metroidvania in the same sense that Zelda games are.
That's true. That's true.
Huh. Yeah.
Because Dark Souls, they give you all the tools from the get-go, right? They don't give you, they don't.
No, you have to go and get.
You need, like,
You have to upgrade your weapons.
Yeah.
You have to level up to get more health and.
But there's nothing like really blocking you. Like you could still run like with naked kind of thing and do like a kind of thing, right?
No, certain bosses literally block you from areas.
Really? Oh.
you have to.
To get down to the demon area underneath Blighttown in Dark Souls 1, you have to kill two bosses.
Yeah. So it's not a power up, but it's kind of the same kind of thing of like you explore so you can find the big bad, so you can kill it, so you can explore more to find the other big bad. And so it's kind of a more balance between exploration and combat, but maybe more exploration than combat? I don't know. I have never played Dark Souls.
They're fun.
I want to play them.
They are.
Okay, so getting traversal abilities. Is that power or authority?
Both.
Okay.
It rewards you for having explored to that point, and it strictly gives you the ability, therefore the power to do more.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
both a reward of getting to that point and a power to continue doing your thing.
I agree with that. If you had to say which one is it more of?
About power, it's literally another
Right.
do before.
It's a power up, but yeah, that's a very good point. It serves as both. It gives you the authority to explore because you want to get the next one, and that kind of gives you authority to do so, and it gives you the power to do more. Yeah. The secondary, the collectibles. What are the collectibles that empower?
Power.
Well, things like charms are power, but there are also collectibles that are not power-ups. Like, that game is like...
Charms
There's the
have an
one that you
effect.
can see yourself
Yes.
in the map.
Yes. Yeah.
So that it gives you the authority to know where you are.
Right. Right.
Is
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I would say that's a power.
Yeah.
But like, what type of progress are you being empowered by the existence of charms?
All
Just
sorts of stuff.
finding hidden things.
The one that tells you where you are on the map helps with exploration. Because you're like, I want to go through this door right here. How many doors above? Where is it? Where exactly am I? I don't exactly know. But if you know where you are on the map, then you can go, okay, I just have to do this to get to that point.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah. So the way that I would put that is, it gives you the authority to explore every nook and cranny. So there's that, and that feeds into power. And the power depends, like you said, like the power, if it's the compass, to explore more. If it's the stronger nail that does more damage, then it gives you the power and also a little bit of authority to go kill some enemies. Yeah. So it's a very empowering mechanic, because I spend my whole time trying to find every single charm because I want to collect them all. So there's also that. And then as I'm getting them, it's giving me more power, but it also like it's kind of driving me to play the game in different ways. Yeah.
So from the beginning of the game, you have the authority to collect charms.
Yeah.
You have the authority to collect all the charms.
Mhm.
And as you get charms, each charm is empowering you to collect more charms, because one, it gives you a little bonus.
Yeah.
And then it fills in the spots. You're like, oh, I get a bonus. And then you're like, okay, now I want to know what all the other bonuses that I could possibly get are.
Yes. And I would say it gives you also power. Like, for example, you get one that makes your nail longer, your weapon longer. So once I got that also kind of gave me authority to play the game in a different way, or not authority, but rather power. I became much more prone to pogoing, where I would always have that charm, and I would jump on enemies and hit downwards to bounce, because that charm empowered me to do that, and that is a lot of fun for me.
I'm not very good at that.
It's hard, but when you have the longer nails, easier. Okay. Little thing about parallel progression. Daily quests in mobile games, it's usually like you have 5 quests all happening at the same time, and just by playing the game normally, you kind of complete most of them. Huh?
Game is this?
Clash of Clans.
So great.
This is the clan thingy, or what is it? I don't remember.
What was that?
Is this like the clan stuff? Or is
Yeah.
it- Oh,
Clash
yeah.
of Clans. Number of them empower the player to do more things than they normally would.
Technically, like you kind of, because it gives them more resources, it allows them to build more stuff.
Build that, it gives them more power.
It also encourages them
Yeah,
to
to keep
focus
playing.
on different things.
Yes.
To interact with something.
Loot 2 500 dark elixir from player villages in 1 hour. This gives you the authority to prioritize on dark elixir. Does that make it good? That it's empowering you to do more things at once?
That depends on. So, if you want your player to focus on one thing and do that one thing very well, because that one thing is what's really fun, then giving them a bunch of stuff that makes them not focus on that one thing isn't something you want. But if all of these things can be accomplished while you're doing the one thing that's really fun, or the many things that are really fun, then having them in there gives them multiple views of, oh, I'm progressing in this way, I'm progressing in this way, and I'm progressing in this way. And it also encourages them to, so like I play a lot of Eternal, and Eternal gives you like missions of play with so many cards of this type.
Yeah.
And then maybe I don't have a deck that's really useful of that type, so it encourages me to build a deck of that type, which is part of the fun of the game.
Yes.
And then I play with that type, so it encourages you to use to explore the aspects of the game that the creators think are fun.
Yeah, it pushes you to do interesting things you might not have done if you weren't empowered to do so by the quest.
Yeah, quests don't have to be tedious. They can be empowering and help you discover interesting new things. They can also be tedious. It depends on the point of the game and what you're using the quests for, right?
Back to here, loot 2,500. I don't know if that's 2,500 or like 2,500.
2,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
Loot 2,500 dark elixir from player villages in 1 hour. Is this changing the way you play the game?
Makes you play for an hour, and then does this thing happen on like a time basis where you can only do so many things per like second, and then
Probably.
you have to pay money?
Yeah, and then
When you play the game, you know.
I didn't know about this in the future, but I probably implemented it to keep player enticing to play more.
Yeah.
It's a psychology of like, oh, I only have to play these couple quests a day kind of thing. And that's why. It's a form of progression, more so just like the idea of like more so progression just to make them keep playing than actually encouraging interesting gameplay or so.
Right. So this can get hairy because you could be empowering the player not to do something fun, but rather just to keep playing the game, whether or not they're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
So you can empower people to do bad things.
That quest they failed might be empowering the player to give the company money.
Yeah.
Because like if you can only do like so many missions in an hour, and you have 1 hour, but you can pay to be able to do more missions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's how the psychology of mobile games.
Yeah, a lot of
should be
mobile
its own,
games.
like, yeah, we should like talk about that. It's super. But yeah, sorry for that.
No, that should be. I'm pretty sure that will be at some point. Maybe next year.
I'll attend that.
Its own workshop. Yeah. That's kind of the Skinner box is something that, in a way, empowers you to do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
They depower you so that you want that power back. Get you addicted.
Yeah. You lose power to do the things that you want to do, but you gain the power to do the things you want to do. So you're pushed to spend that money.
Mm-hmm.
Literally all Skinner boxes is the power and authority to do the one thing I want you to do, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You
that
just get to push button to get money to get things.
to spend money to get things to spend
All
money.
you can do in the box is push the button. So you use the power to hit the button. All that is done in reaction to you hitting the button is you get some sort of reward, maybe food. And that's empowering you to do that. So that's the authority to hit the button and the power.
But then there's also the thing of like the reasoning why, because in psychology, you can also make it instead of a fixed chance though, they make it random chance, and then that's make it even more addicting and stuff like that because it's not always guaranteed.
I think we learned about that
yeah.
in psychology about like the best model for getting people addicted.
Exactly. You would have to make it like it's.
I think it's variable.
That's humans.
No, all beings, even the mice will click more variable ratios. Because it's like
That's right.
I will click the button more because even though it's not instead of giving guaranteed, I want to keep pushing because I get just not because of the thing, so it's like the chance of getting it is more exciting than actually getting the thing.
Perhaps because the mental idea of it is a lot that could be a lot
Right.
is more tantalizing than like I got a fixed amount. It's pretty okay.
And that's why slots are so addictive. That's the whole point of slots, kind of thing. And this is its own kind of formation of slots because instead of guaranteeing it, it's like giving you gameplay to get your things, kind of thing, and it's not guaranteed all the time, so they keep coming back. That's why daily chests are less incentive to keep going back to than daily quest kind of thing, because daily quests make you do an action that kind of feels like an achievement, a mini achievement every time.
Yeah.
It does making your brain feel like, oh, I'm actually getting something instead of being given something like daily chests. And that's why some people don't play as many games with daily chests as much because it's like it's a coincide with something else kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the psychology of mobile games and addiction. That's fun.
Very interesting.
It's a very.
Well, that's kind of like what empowerment is. It's a psychological trait.
Mm-hmm. What's parallel progression? So parallel progression is then the idea of bringing it together with it, right? But not actually progressing the game.
Right. Well, parallel progression is just the idea of as you're playing the game, you're progressing in multiple things at once.
That happens.
So does that empower? So kind of the question is if you have 5 quests and to do different things that are all happening at the same time, are they empowering to do each of those things, or to focus one at a time, or to does it split your attention? Does it improve your gameplay, and that kind of depends on a lot of different factors. Yeah.
Could you also say parallel progression is also like MMO quests? Because I know I play Maple Story, of course, and you can accept multiple side quests at once.
Yeah. Same with World of Warcraft.
Yeah, exactly. So when you do that, does that empower you to take a bunch of quests and try to like game the system and like
Right.
you spend as little time as to get those requests as possible.
Yeah, it depends on how much overlap there are between the quests.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something to think about. I don't have like a fixed like thought on like whether to do this or not. Just like something to think about.
It's
that-
very
When
interesting.
you overlap them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, nonlinear progression. So, let's say you built this wonderful little Minecraft house. Wow.
Shaders.
Honestly, the ray tracing for Minecraft on Node was actually really pretty. Like it looks so damn.
Is that progress?
Yeah.
You built that
What is
house.
progress?
Yeah.
You built the thing.
It's self-made progress. It's what you
were
choose to
empowered
feel like
to be
progressive.
creative.
Right. There's a progress in creation. You're progressing in the state of your home.
Plus, you now are empowered to be more protected from enemies.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you also are now have gained like kind of a bit of knowledge. Like the more houses you build in Minecraft, the better you get at building houses in Minecraft. Building that house empowered you to build the house, but it also empowered you to collect wood, to collect glass, and all the different things.
To search wikis to know how to build staircases because you forgot.
Right. So, given that, is the crafting / building system in Minecraft a progression system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like from my own understanding of progression system, it's like the idea of you're given a task, and that task will give you a reward, and that is not always a physical reward, it may be a mental reward. The progression of learning how to the task of learning how to build this house is there's learning it, there's getting materials for it, all the other things, and each time you're giving either a mental learning something from it. As like I'm learning how to do the crafting things again, I'm learning recipes, I'm learning how to do the architecture of the building again, and learning all these little kind of things that kind of progresses you to keep doing that, I guess.
Yeah. If you look at progression as the addition of experience, then you're experiencing the new things that you've crafted. So there's progress there. So it's kind of interesting when you look at, like, normally we look at progression system as like level 0 to level 90 and gaining all these new abilities in this talent tree. You can look at this very non-linear kind of like progression just as far as like what kinds of items have I crafted so far, what have I collected so far. There's progression there.
Because it's not always like material in a sense. It could be something that you just learn in your own head.
Yeah.
Nonlinear progression is also a pretty abstract concept that I think you appreciate more as you get older, which may or may not be true. But I wonder why they decided to add a linear, achievement-based system of, have you gone to the nether yet? Have you crafted diamonds? Have you gotten iron? Break down a tree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that introduces aspects of linearity to it, but still the core of it is, I mean, there exists both.
I think that just kind of is a little nudge to empower you to like, oh yeah, maybe I should cut down a tree and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it might be a ramp to,
Yeah. I almost look at it as a teaching tool almost.
yeah, same thing.
Right. Okay.
It's the idea of I guess. No, never mind. Sorry.
Okay. So basically, in conclusion, there are tons of different types of progression that you can have in your game. Every game has progression, just by nature of the fact that it's a game. The progression does not have to equate to game completion. The player can experience multiple forms of progression simultaneously, and progression is not always linear. For example, which item have you crafted yet? There's not a linear progression of that. So to empower a player is giving them a choice and ability to progress in the ways that they want and are allowed in the game. So it empowers and rewards activities, but not always directly. Empowerment grows enjoyment of the progress in question. So if you're empowered to explore, exploring will feel more fun. that's kind of just a breakdown. So when you're making a game, no matter what type of game, think about what authority exists in your game, right? What type of progression is viable in your game? If you're making a shooter, does the player have the authority to engage in diplomacy, to explore? If you're making a choice-based game, does your player have the authority to shoot people and kill them? I don't know. So think about that. Think about what is currently available to the player at any given point in time. The player has a set of like all the things they have authority to do at any point in time. What do they have the power to do? And then when you put them together, you know kind of what is currently being empowered by your game. But so we've been talking this whole time about what is empowerment, what is empowered in what game. So if you can point out what is empowered in your game, compare that to what do you want to empower in your game. Because this is important. This is like, does the progress of the game match the fantasy of the game? How many times have you played a game that's like, I don't know, it's not about combat, but like it keeps empowering you to do combat. And then you do combat and it's like you've lost sight of the entire game. Or maybe the fantasy of the game is about something, but the gameplay is about something completely different. And there's like a divergence in the kinds of things that you want to do versus what the game is actually about. Yeah, I guess like, do you guys have any examples of the game?
Not a strong
Probably all the games that we've tried to make.
every single game in general.
Ooh.
Just kidding. But I mean, like, that's the thing that I'm now thinking about the games that I've made is, do I have problems with the progress not matching what I want?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, like, in any given game, what are you empowered to do? Like, I'm trying to think. I made a game where the idea was that you're sneaking around and you have a light that can scare off certain enemies, but it can also attract other enemies. So the idea was to empower this kind of careful play style. But if you just like turn your light off and like you can kind of see the wall, or just have the light on just a tiny little bit so you can see it, like enemies. You can basically like sprint around things. So you're being empowered to play this game very high speed and like avoid enemies instead of being sneaky. So there's a distance there, right?
So you
Yeah.
just like decrease the
I guess two examples I could give would be like Stardew Valley, where it's like I really like the fishing aspect and the mining aspect of the game. But like, I mean, to be fair, Stardew Valley doesn't have to encourage farming, but like they do encourage farming. But I do want to do other parts of the game that let me do that. But when I have to do farming, I kind of like struggle to like keep maintenance, keep all other things. But then I want to talk about others all the time, but I don't have the time because I have to keep the cluster thing, and that's time management is all out already for that. So you have to like know how to do it, and that's kind of makes it harder for like getting that flow.
So you feel like you're not empowered to mine or fish as much as you want to because you don't have the authority to spend all your day doing that because you kind of have to farm for a certain amount of time each day at least.
As well as like money incentive as well, because you get better crop money. Because if you do crops and do fertilizer and do all that preparation, you'll get better money output than just mining and exploring and getting special fishes, which is unfortunate.
And so you're very much empowered to farm, not so much other things, and that's a common problem, especially. So Stardew Valley isn't an MMO, but that happens in MMOs where people of many different backgrounds come together to play MMOs, and they want to have different fantasies. Maybe I want to boot up World of Warcraft and just be a blacksmith. I don't want to kill things. I just want to blacksmith. And there is that system, but I'm empowered to kill things, not do that, because
to get to the higher level mining points, I have to fight a bunch of enemies to get to them. Yeah.
Same thing with RuneScape in that sense. Like you can't wield an adamant pickaxe unless you get a level attack of 40. Because you did to wield a weapon of that metal type, you have to fight things.
Right.
So if you've been focusing on mining like half of the game, you have literally you have to now start from level 1 to level 40 to just get and focus on your attacking power, and that becomes like why?
Yeah.
Like you can't min-max all in this one thing unless you supplement with other aspects, and I like that, but also don't like that. You know, what I mean, it's a bit of it makes mixed bag kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And then lastly, for a fun one, was the game that Brian made me play, which was the drug one.
Substance.
Substance.
Oh,
It was
okay.
very the idea of literally you were supposed to like understand like collecting money, and then there was like the option of drugs. And the drugs, at least, were like at first were kind of like, oh, they're all right until you were given like an unlimited amount. And then once you give them a limited amount and you just start wanting to like break it, like there was one to like speed, hysteria, and like beer. And beer made you have like extra health with like bad movement. Speed made you had like super quickly but like super out of control, and hysteria made everything move slowly.
It was
But then-
paranoia.
Paranoia,
It was
exactly.
weed, yeah.
Also random camera
Mhm.
movements.
Yeah.
But yeah, but those like, but if I made it, but having those abilities though made it feel so much fun. Even though the point was those like you didn't want to, you know, the idea of drugs kind of make it hinder your ability. But it made it so interesting to make it feel different, because then there was a point where it's like if I got to complete the game, I just got paranoia glasses, which essentially made you high forever. So then I just spammed being high, and then when I went there, everything was just slow. Like they all stopped moving because I was just so in zen, and it was like, and I just got to click all the money and everything, and just kept farming that way. So that was an interesting way that I
I
felt.
think that there is a mistake in how that works
Mhm.
for how it's designed, because the design goal was for the theme of the game jam was the more you have, the worse it is. So the idea was that there's these power-ups that could power you up and also give you like a side effect that's worse.
Right.
So that if you keep powering that up, piling it up on top of each other and letting it stack, you basically make it unplayable. Like if you get way drunk, like you can't even your character accelerates so slowly that like you can't even control them anymore. But I guess I didn't test the weed very well because you could break the entire
You
game.
can break the game. But here's an interesting thing, is you're kind of empowered to do both. In that game, from what I've heard, it feels like I am empowered because it's the quote-unquote safe option to not do too much substance. But I'm also empowered because I want to see what happens to substance abuse.
Yeah.
But even though that's not viable, you are empowered to do that, and when you do that, you're kind of progressing in knowledge of
Substance
this
abuse.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
This
this
is bad.
definitely. There was I went with speed first, maxed out my speed, and I literally flew off the map. Like I ran off the map, and I would just disappear.
It
Kind
makes
of
you
thing.
jitter too.
Yeah, it makes you jitter
And
really
you can't
fast.
control your character, yeah.
Mhm.
Do you remember what the item was called that gave you free speed?
RV.
Yeah.
Because RV.
Oh.
Yeah.
Breaking Ball.
Breaking
Yeah.
Ball.
Oh, okay.
Speed.
Cooking meth.
Yeah.
That's good.
But yeah, it was really, I still like the concept of because then I realized, because as you kept playing, you realize, oh, there are some times when it's okay to be super high, but then it's better at the end of it though, to push all of it, because you have to be, it's better to be sober by the end of it. Because when you're sober, you can push all the things in and get the money backwards, because it's you can being either highly drugged or very not being,
Yeah.
But it empowered you to discover the difference between them, which I think
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
really that. Whether or not it's better to do one or the other is something that I'm not really sure what the game is trying to say.
I don't know,
I mean,
you're
honestly, it was very
empowering a
surprising.
certain kind of discovery.
It's
Yeah.
very, really interesting, because you made the weed one the most beneficial, but because it's also the least harmful.
I think that was the last one I added, and it had the least amount of work into it, which is why it's kind of broken.
But it's interesting. But then also, but yeah, it's the idea of being sober and being super messed up or some kind of thing. And as you learn how, because when you gave me the infinite, it was really interesting, because that made me how much can I push it to break it kind of thing. To what number can I go? Because I went from 50 beers and five speed points, so you have some control. But it was so bad with control. You move so fast that you just ran into every little enemy kind of thing. So that was really funny.
That's another type of progress, just numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Numbers are progress, man.
Oh, idle games. Oh my goodness.
Progress
That-
quest is an
yeah.
interesting thing.
Huh?
A game where you don't get input except for the very beginning, where you start your quest, and then it just runs.
Isn't that a movie?
Well,
You start your progress by giving by buying a ticket and then going, and you don't teach anything after that.
Yeah, but it's like a movie, but it's randomly generating constantly.
there's usually at least some input that the user can do though. Like using an ability that is on a timer or something. Are you thinking of a specific game?
Progress Quest is the name of the game.
So you start a thing and you just have to watch it and can't do anything? You can't just like leave and like...
You can't minimize
So,
the game.
Yeah, my brother's had it running on his phone for like 2 years now.
Oh, so you leave the app and come back?
Yes.
Okay.
And then you can come back and be like, oh wow, my disco wizard just slayed like 20 things and is now selling their courses.
There's lots of...
Oh my goodness, that'd be so funny.
But then
Just-
the thing is,
you're like
you
you're
don't
running,
give input.
like
have
you
to
run a
come back.
world in your phone kind of thing.
Usually there's caps of like they can make a certain amount of money and then like it comes up to a certain point and then it stops. So you have to know to come back to the app to get that money and then like
There's no
start.
Oh, those are idle
There's
game
no
mechanics.
Right. I feel like Progress Quest is like a joke game.
Yeah,
It's
it
a-
is.
Like there's literally zero input. You just keep watching it and things happen.
Yeah.
That's actually really funny. Can you like scroll back like a text message thing and you see all the
Oh
old
yeah, there's
events?
a chat.
Oh, I love that. I kind of want to download that right now.
That's so interesting.
It's just like a game.
Oh yeah, this does not fit because it is no choice of the game.
It's like they can make.
I don't know, you're empowered to watch. Yeah. So an empowered player feels like they can make the choice to do what they want to do in the game, can succeed at it, and will derive something from it. Problem there being is you can't empower the player to do everything, right?
Do you feel distracted from this discussion?
Yeah.
Do you want to pick this up after?
Yeah, probably.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
It's okay.
He's
So,
empowered one of your viewers to not be
yeah, so
Were you addicted?
No, I'm just
Just
gonna finish
anything.
the problem with this, right, is that you can't empower the player to do everything because you can only make so much game, right? And like if I'm making Call of Duty, like I don't want to empower the player to do diplomacy, right? What if, but like, and then you may ask, like, what if the player wants to do diplomacy? Well, here's the thing.
this game.
Right, if you're making Call of Duty, the player probably won't want that. So when you're making a game, like you have to predict. You have to, and like we could get into the whole marketing of it, but like you want to
Know what your audience is.
know what your audience is and know what they're gonna want and predict that and account for that. Because if you do that poorly, then that's gonna go bad. Yeah.
Question, because I know Ryan's very adamant about like, making a game that anyone can play kind of thing. Right? You know,
Ryan is not.
Really?
I don't think he was in support of that argument.
Really?
I don't remember.
You said that on a few occasions.
Yeah, like everyone can play it kind of thing, and like everyone has the ability
He's
to.
most interested in making games
Okay,
that everyone can
that's
play.
accessible.
Accessibility.
Yeah,
Yeah,
accessibility
I
is
think-
important, but I. Okay.
Accessibility, I think his idea is to
I don't think you
make
should-
sure the game, like especially like multiplayer games, make sure the game is enjoyable for the winner and the loser if it's a competitive multiplayer game. It
Mhm.
should be enjoyable for everyone who's playing the game.
That's.
I think games should be able to be picked up by anybody, but I don't think that you should try to market a game to literally everybody.
I don't think Ryan
World
is
of
saying that
Warcraft,
either. I'm pretty
Even
sure
that,
Ryan is
yeah.
focusing on like, if you've got a multiplayer game, the game should be enjoyable for everyone playing the game.
Right.
I'll need to ask him in the future because I know it's like the idea of of the audience for game. It's like if the game is not fun for a certain person, he failed as a designer. I remember that was the one thing he says.
Well, it depends on what your target
Dep-
audience is.
exactly,
And
depends.
there will always be somebody that does not like a game.
Mhm,
Yeah.
exactly.
You
I
can't,
agree.
like if you're making the next Dark Souls, you can't try to empower old people by adding Wii bowling into it. Although that would be really dope if you could bowling ball some demons. Just saying.
You can dash off them and then jump off their heads. Kinda like bowling ball.
I like bowling. There you go. Old people like that, right?
People like shuffleboard, right? Mahjong.
So, yeah, just like something to think about. Predict what your audience wants. This kind of like boils down like all design decisions like depend on the audience, but like what progress is in your game, what you empower depends on your audience. Yeah.
I would argue that also a lot of strong empowering decisions you can make in games have trade-offs. They'll disempower certain other things. For instance, in Call of Duty, the decision to make the levels very linear, boxed in, follow the path and shoot at the enemies is a decision that empowers shooting as the constant thing you're doing, but disempowers you from exploration, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yes.
Strictly limits you.
I'm really interested in discussing this whole thing about this game, but you guys haven't
What's
played
that
it. It's a pipe connecting puzzle game.
Huh. Oh yeah, that one. So it's, geez, it's 4:47. So I'm gonna end the workshop now. That was some good talk.
I want to have Luke go off. Okay.
What
You
was
can
I at?
see
33?
you were on